Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state. At least on that statement, few people would argue. The question then is, how are we going to get out of this mess? We've had 44 years post-independence. And in those 44 years, Zanu PF has rigged elections and thus managed to stay in power. And as long as Zimbabwe remains a pariah state, ruled by corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical thugs, we will remain a failed state. So the question is, how are we going to get out of this hole on earth, hellhole on earth of our own making? Because it is of our own making. The solution is really very clear. About 20 years after independence, in the 1990s, late 1990s, the nation did come to the conclusion that as long as Zanu PF is able to rig elections, we will not get out of this mess. That was the right conclusion. So the solution, how to get out, how to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections and staying in power, that is the problem. The solution was very clear. We can either wage yet another armed struggle, because Zanu PF was never going to give up power easily. There's no doubt about it. Or we can elect the opposition and give them the task of implementing the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Very difficult task, by all means. I'm not pretending that was going to be easy. But people did make that sacrifice. They've risked livelihoods, limbs, and over 500 people were killed in 2008 alone to elect the opposition into positions of power, on the understanding that they will implement the democratic reforms necessary to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. MDC was launched in 1999. So now we are looking at 24 years down the line. And last year, Zanu PF blatantly rigged those elections. One has got to ask the question, why? Why is it that 24 years down the line, including 5 in the GNU of 2008 to 2013, Zanu PF is still able to blatantly rig elections? The answer is, of course, that MDC leaders and Triple C leaders sold out. The solution is to acknowledge that problem and elect opposition leaders who will implement the reforms. But this is proving to be a bridge too far. We have got some Zimbabweans who cannot understand the concept of leaders must be accountable to the people. They're really struggling to understand that concept. Some of them are struggling to accept even that MDC leaders have sold out. It's unbelievable. 24 years down the line, not even one single token reform implemented. Surely, you should be asking yourself, what were these big guys supposed to be doing? What did we elect them? We risked lives, livelihoods, limbs to elect these people. They have failed. Why can't we accept that? But some people are finding that just a mountain too far, too high to climb. They cannot accept that MDC leaders have failed. Here is a video clip of Norbert Longo talking about that very issue of the opposition's failures.
Business. This is what I want to remind most of our MPs and other people.
Do you think they look at it as a business?
Yes, they look at it as a business. Because they look at it as a business seriously. Because the moment they go, business and employment creation, because if they go to parliament, you are employed. You get a car, you get a stable salary, and you are paid until your term is over. Already you are employed. If you are out, you're out of employment.
If you serve 2 terms, you get a pension?
You get a pension. Then already, this is why people kill in politics. They kill to be in parliament. This is why we have violence in this country. Because there is no employment. The only employment which is there is in politics. There is no other outside employment. So for them, a very good example is, look at what happened to CCC, the Triple C party. Have a look. When they lost, when they said they were rigged, what I expected from them, I expected all parliamentarians to say, we are not going to go to participate in a rigged system. And we are not going to sit in a rigged parliament. Because the elections have been rigged. So all of us were not going to parliament. Imagine what could have happened. We could have gone into new elections. There's no way Zanu PF was going to rule alone.
You think so?
Yes.
Do they care?
Caring or not caring, the public would have forced them, because the majority of the people would want representation in parliament.
That is exactly the point. MDC, Triple C guys were elected by the people to implement the democratic changes necessary to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And so if Zanu PF is still continuing to rig the elections, then they have failed. And it should not be a quantum leap to say, no, you rigged the elections and we should not participate. The truth of the matter is they've been participating in these flawed elections out of greed. It is the people themselves who have been slow to realize that simple reality. SADC and the AU election observers made it very clear that last year's elections were flawed and illegal. But what some people are failing to understand here, because they're asking, why then did SADC not turn around and say we are denying the Zanu PF regime legitimacy. What you've got to understand is, how could SADC do that if, one, the opposition, the country's main opposition, in this case Triple C, insisted in participating in those elections, claiming that they have plugged all the vote rigging loopholes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. The people themselves participated in their millions. Nearly 2 million people, according to SEC, voted for Chamisa last year because they had believed the lie that Chamisa had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. You cannot deny that that was irresponsible on the part of the electorate. Because this is not the first time the people have been conned into participating in flawed elections. In 2018, Chamisa made a similar promise. He promised that MDC alliance had stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. We know, of course, that was a lie. And yet they participated. Last year, even after SADC and the AU had condemned those elections, our Triple C friends still went ahead and took up their seats. What do you expect SADC to do? I believe that we can end this circus in Zimbabwe of rigged elections if we get our act together. At the present moment, we are looking to 2028. Forget the circus that is going on at present of this Mnangagwa trying to extend his rule by another term. That circus, as much as we, the ordinary Zimbabweans, may not be interested in it, to be quite honest, we haven't got much influence in it. This is an in-house fight. Whichever faction in Zanu PF wins that fight will prevail. And to be quite honest, it really doesn't matter to the ordinary Zimbabwean, because as long as Zanu PF is able to rig the elections, whoever they decide is the presidential candidate will be the presidential candidate and will go on to win 2028. Whether it's Mnangagwa or Chiwenga, to the ordinary Zimbabwean, it really makes no difference at all. To pretend that somehow that makes a difference is just as meaningless as a cornered mouse thinking that it makes a difference whether the snake that is facing it is a cobra or a black mamba. Either snake is so poisonous, it'll kill it. So what's the difference? We should not be involved in this. What we should be involved with is to make sure that Zanu PF does not rig 2028 and get away with it. That should be our focus. That should be our main concern. At the present moment, the only way we can stop Zanu PF rigging the elections is getting reforms implemented. I don't see that happening. I don't see Triple C leadership that that is in office right now doing anything about that. So there would be no meaningful reforms implemented. That's number one. Number two, I do not see our friend Nelson Chamisa and company doing anything to stop the participation. I think what we are looking at here is a situation where Nelson Chamisa and company are going to participate in flawed elections in 2028. Indeed, Nelson Chamisa right now is gearing to launch his so-called blue train, and he will come up with the usual promises that he will win those elections because he has got stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. This is just history repeating itself. You've been convincing people that this time you will win, just as he convinced people last time that he would win the elections, when we all know that he was lying. That is the challenge that we are facing here. We can't stop Chamisa launching his blue train and participating in these flawed elections. But what we can do is stop this Chamisa Chete Chete brigade participating in their millions. Because if they participate in their millions, I can rest assure you, SADC will shrug their shoulders and allows Zanu PF to get away with another rigged election. The task, therefore, before us is to make sure that these Chamisa Chete Chete brigades hammer into their heads that Chamisa and company are not demigods, as some of them believe, but rather they are ordinary mortals. And not ordinary mortals, but corrupt and incompetent and liars. The debate of holding Chamisa and company to account has been, with some people still stubbornly maintaining that we should not hold them to account, defending them at every turn. You try to say Chamisa failed, and some people will take it personally. The truth of the matter is, he did fail. They did fail to implement even one token reform. Why is it so difficult for some people to accept that reality? And yet it is. These are the Chamisa Chete Chete brigade. They do not see, they do not want to accept Chamisa is not only an ordinary mortal, fallible like everybody else. They would want, as this individual is putting it, they don't want anyone to hold Chamisa to account. They are saying you should come up with solutions and stop pointing fingers. The truth of the matter is, one has got to ask solutions to what? These individuals have failed to understand what the reforms are all about. And it is no surprise they don't know how the reforms are implemented, much less that the GNU of 2008 to 2013 was a golden opportunity for Zimbabwe to implement those reforms. And therefore then Chamisa and company sold out. They cannot accept that Mugabe bribed Chamisa and company to forget about the reforms. They cannot accept that. Our biggest task, our biggest challenge is to convince them that that is a historic fact. That they cannot keep on pretending that Chamisa and company will deliver democratic change, because they will never deliver that. If they fail to do so during the GNU when they had the golden opportunity to do so, it is naive to think they'll do so now. Since their failure to implement even one token reform during the GNU, Chamisa and company have been participating in flawed elections out of greed. This is a reality. This is a historic fact. Forcing these people, this Chamisa Chete Chete brigade, to open their eyes and their minds and accept the reality that Chamisa Chete Chete, Chamisa and company have not only failed to implement reforms, but that by participating and conning people to participate, they are perpetuating the dictatorship. It's not going to be easy. Nearly 2 million of these Chamisa Chete Chete brigade participated in last year's election, to say nothing of the 4 million or so, mostly in the diaspora, who cheered and applauded the participation. And some of them bankrolled it. So the task of convincing this Chamisa Chete Chete brigade that it is folly to participate in flawed elections in 2028, because that will only give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate our suffering, is the number one task, the A1 task before us all. And as we can see from the hostility of some people who still believe that Chamisa Chete Chete is a god, infallible God who should not be held to account, it is not going to be an easy task to convince these people. But I think it can be done, and we must do it. The prospect of Zimbabweans participating in their millions in 2028 elections, only to give Zanu PF legitimacy. It's real, and yet unthinkable. How is it possible that 44 years after independence, we still can't run free, fair, and credible elections? And come 2028, we'll be talking of 48 years after independence, and we still can't hold free, fair, and credible elections in this day and age. That is the reality that we are facing in Zimbabwe today. It is not an impossible task. I don't think it is impossible. But I will also be honest to say it is not going to be an easy task, because some of our fellow Zimbabweans out there are brain dead. It's not an insult, it's just stating a fact. If you can be conned into believing an idiotic lie like I've plugged for tricking loopholes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections, when you know yourself that the country does not even have a verified voters roll, that Zanu PF is able to frog march rural voters to attend its rallies and to vote for the party. How anyone can believe that we can win rigged elections beggars belief. And yet, millions believed it and continue to believe it and continue to support Chamisa and company on the basis of such idiotic lies. I think it will be unforgivable if we fail to stop, because that is the only way we're going to end this insanity of participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy and to perpetuate our own suffering. We must stop the Chamisa Chete Chete brigade participating in flawed elections. It is that simple. Yes, easier said than done. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon and have a good day.